Welcome my friends to a new episode of custom game content for our favorite board game Kingdom Death Monster. Today I will give you an overview of custom cards I designed and printed over the last few months. But why would I even take all this effort upon me to add even more cards to a game that is already packed with enough game components to make you think about hiring professional help just to organize everything? Well, obviously the answer lies somewhere within this very statement. A game of this size takes away a lot of the time you should spend playing and shifts it to repeated organizing, looking through the rulebook, either for clarifications or for story events, and ultimately you will have your fun cut down to a position of an organizing manager rather than living and experiencing the game. My ultimate goal for this game is to have everything needed in eyesight or one hand move away, and therefore improve flow and experience. Of course, there's a limit to this. Everything that happens only once or twice during a whole campaign, like monster introductions, stay and should always be experienced with the rulebook. Let's just say I would print every single story event on cards. What would be my benefit? There wouldn't be one, of course. I would now have to search through cards the same way I have to search through the rulebook. Therefore, I decided to only print certain types of story events. And I've only made a small exception to this principle by printing out the 4 core principles on settlement-sized cards. But after playing with them for some sessions, I would consider them crystal clear overkill. And although they are nice to look at, they more or less have turned out as bookmarks to my rulebook rather than being really useful. Still, I wanted to show you how they look, and maybe you have a different opinion than me, and maybe you consider this to be a very useful asset to your game. But now, with that out of the way, let me give you a short overview of everything that indeed turned out to be quite useful for my campaign before I go into great detail about everything afterwards. Let's start with the most obvious one that turned out to be a big time saver in many situations. Most games have them, most people love them, Kingdom Death Monster doesn't provide them. A player aid. Now it is of course impossible to get every rule this game provides on a single card. And I haven't even considered doing that. But the main rule problems and situations that turn up either during the survivor or monster turn during the showdown can be handled with these cards. There is one side dedicated to the monster turn and one side for the survivor act. These seem quite chaotic at first sight, and that's because of the complexity of the rules that have to be included. I don't want this to be a long video explaining everything that's happening on this card, but to give you some insight, the monster turn side is centered around the function of the AI card and what each section does, and what every keyword and symbol you might encounter during gameplay means to your game. If you ever need to look up the difference between a flow and an alert, what kind of collision can be caused and how they differ from one another, or if you have problems on when all these different triggers take effect during a monster attack, like before damage and after hit, when and what dice can be dodged, or when block from gear cards takes effect. This section under attack gives you a rundown of all the steps that take place during this monster attack. Turning the card around, we have a complete survivor turn, starting at the top, running down all the steps. When survival opportunities occur, what different kind of hit location cards cause what effect, as well as a rundown of a survivor weapon attack. I have played the game for many years, and still I find myself checking these cards for specifics, and it has trimmed down unintentional misplays by a good amount. Of course, there can't be answers to every problem that you may encounter during play, but it should be enough to run a smooth showdown and don't get caught up flipping through the rulebook as much. These cards don't need a lot of explanation. They are of course all about the severe injuries you will have to deal with during a showdown. If you are like me and blessed with notoriously bad dice rolling, these will be of great use to you. Not that they make your rolls any better, but at least you can give your survivor a quick conclusion to unfortunate monster attacks. The backs of the cards show the different hit location types, and I've included a card for brain trauma as well. Brain trauma in itself, it's its own kind of thing, but it just felt right to have this together with these other cards. A more pleasant kind of card type are story events. Of course, these don't include every story event you encounter during gameplay, I have talked about this before, but the ones that occur multiple times during a campaign. They are categorized into this new kind of card type and have their specifics listed underneath. I tried to fit some rulebook art to the different events to make them a bit more invasive, and overall I'm pretty happy about how they turned out. Some classic and reoccurring story events are of course Age, Bold, and Inside. These all have some art from the core rulebook and are just handy because you might have to use these stories nearly every time you play the game. These ones I just keep alongside my board game until opportunity strikes. But I also got a card for Intimacy, which I keep by my organ grinder, and along with that story event I keep my 3 different options if a savior is born. The rules state to choose what savior you want and you just pick it, but most of the time I'll use the cards to get a random one and be surprised. Of course, I printed out some additional cards that take up very specific places during gameplay as well. One of them being Overwhelming Darkness. The Overwhelming Darkness cards will of course be placed on the corresponding place on the hunt boards, and I have included some original artwork, as the rulebook doesn't really provide any for the different kind of paths, and this seemed to be a good opportunity. These cards are of a larger size, and for my next print run I might decide to print them on a smaller scale, so they fit the style of the other story events, but I didn't especially mind them to be a bit larger, as they will be kept alongside the hunt board most of the time. I also decided to print out the next 2 most occurring events during a hunt, Herb Gathering and Mineral Gathering. There's just so much text for these events and I didn't want to sacrifice readability for unity of card sizes. To add a little bit of context, I have all intentions to make some form of 3D printed stands for every one of these cards that will be set on the hunt board, and they will hold these cards in a semi-upright position. But that's some time down the road, as I'm still designing and modeling upgrades for the individual monster bases, and am far from finished doing that. But as I'm already set up with the hunt phase, I want to show you some additional cards I printed and didn't design myself, and they improve the hunt experience a lot. Now, these are all the hunt events you can find in the core rulebook, but designed by my favorite custom creator for this board game, ZZG Team. If you have never heard of these cards, I strongly recommend you visit their website. I will link it in the descriptions, of course, so check out all the great stuff they have provided for this game. Now, in short, these cards come into play when you would roll for a random hunt event. Instead of rolling dice, you now can pull from the stack of event cards. But there are of course some additional game mechanics that are custom and can be implemented to your game, if you choose so. Instead of having a single pile of hunt events to pull from, ZZG Team made it optional for you to separate all these cards into 3 different decks. These are called Monster Trail, Beaten Path, and Unknown Path. Now, these are the original story events, but they are divided into different thematics and difficulty. Once you start the hunt for the monster, you can decide which path to follow, giving you an opportunity to choose different levels of difficulty and make it a bit more up to you if you really get your survivors killed during this hunt. Of course, a more difficult path might be more rewarding, but if your settlement, for example, might be close to wiped out, it might be wise to choose a more safe path. There is also an option to make these hunt events even more custom by using a more advanced developing hunt event system by CZG. This makes the hunt events evolvable, meaning once you pull a hunt event, for example this one, and the card has a marking with an A, you will work through it and then replace it with its advancement story. This implements a evolving story for the events, and they will change and advance during your campaign. To give you a short example, we will look at this event 87, and we now imagine I would have pulled it during a hunt. Water flows from the eyes of the surrounding stone faces, gathering in a small pool. Now, any survivor may consume from the pool, but if they decide not to do so, the surface of the pool solidifies into a silver reflective plane. This event will then be replaced by 87B, which is called Mirror World. The next time you pull this event, the survivors will encounter the silver pool and they will have to deal with the consequences of their earlier actions. So I really love the system, and I think it adds another layer of story to your campaign. So if you like it, don't forget to check it out. The last card that will be set up alongside the hunt board, as well as the showdown board, is the card Runaway. This card is of course something you might forget if there's no card reminding you about it, and that's exactly why I decided to print it. Not that I would ever run away from a hunt or fight, of course. My rolls are just way too bad to make this happen anyway. Now, finally, I've printed a lot of cards that I didn't mention or show here. I think they would make a beautiful video of their own. Most of them are straight reprints of cards that already exist, and some of them are cards ZZG Team provides on their website for free. They are all great, but I saved those for a future video when I revisit my custom player boards, because I'm planning to update them to a plastic version. Those are still in early development, and these are just some early prototypes, but once I'm happy with them, I will make a new video about them and show you my player tokens that in an early development as well. And there are a lot of things I hope to show you soon. But until then, thank you for being here. Please like and subscribe to see my future videos and my future content, and have a great time playing.